So, hi Maryam, and nice to see you again after quite a long time. So, yeah,
Hello.
yeah, my first question to you, my first our conversation piece is really, can you just tell us briefly, or elaborate if you wish, sort of what happened after you graduated and what kind of things you did, and what happened to you, the kind of success, the high points of your career, as it were, to date, because I know lots of things have happened and I've kind of
Yeah,
tracked background, but it'd be nice to just hear a kind of potted history of those. You graduated in 20.
2018. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So, and we're now in just about 2021. So, yeah, what's happened in all those years?
Yeah, I think it was quite overwhelming actually, because when I was in my final year, that's when I started to really you were new on the course, you'd become the head of photography at that point. And I could sense that the course was changing. I also felt hugely reassured when you kind of, became the head of photography, because the structure was just changing, and all of a sudden, from commercial work and documentary, other work was now okay to explore. So you kind of introduced different theories and ideas to the course, which I felt was really encouraging. Definitely encouraged me to you know explore my own identity in photography. So I don't think you knew me very well prior to my third year, but that was because that was the first year you started. But in my first and second year, I a lot of my work was based on fashion and documentary, and that was the only way I felt that my academic course in photography was accepted. If I took pictures of my heritage or my culture or my identity, I felt very awkward before. I just didn't feel like it fit the syllabus or the curriculum. So yeah, I mean, when I did all those things in my final year, so I took these self portraits, I explored my identity. All of a sudden, people were interested. You was in, obviously at university, my peers, my tutors, everybody was very encouraging, and they were very intrigued by my approach to photography and how I used photography to explore my identity. And then it was this,
Can I
sorry.
interrupt?
Yeah.
Because you've made me think here. So from what I'm understanding, at one point you were kind of working in a fairly conventional way in terms of photographic subjects. But were you always interested in your identity then? Was that something that was kind of really intrinsic to like who you are, rather
Yeah.
than just because it's part
Yeah.
of the or because of.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I did photography as an A level, when I was doing it at A level, my tutor, like a lot of art professors, they're absolute nutters. Like they just love to promote anything. And when I was at college, I literally took photographs from my album. I created these photo montages, and I really enjoyed that. And I felt like everybody on my course was also just doing whatever they wanted to do. There was no restrictions. Um, so yeah, and then when I got to university, I almost felt like there was only documentary, only fashion, only landscape, only product. It was very commercial led, I felt, in the first and second year. um so yeah, I mean, that's when I graduated. I mean, prior to just graduating, I applied for Portrait Britain, and I think that was the real push into just keep going. So one of my portraits was selected for the Portrait Britain, and I think that just felt really reassuring, and I just never looked back. I continued to just keep on exploring those themes and stories that I felt connected with my heritage, with me as a person, but also just my community here in Birmingham. So living in England and being surrounded by so many South Asians, I wanted to really um, see what it meant to actually be all those things, and how I could kind of deconstruct that using photographs and images. And I still am trying to do that as a British Asian.
And part of your practice, as I remember, I mean, I know that you did a series of shoots which were kind of quite, I suppose in some ways they must have kind of emerged out of your kind of fashion practice, because they were kind of fairly
Yeah.
traditionally shot portraits. But then you you did a lot of work with your kind of found imagery, didn't you, with your parents' photo albums and things like that. So as I see it, there was a shift in your practice, but is that something that's still oscillating between the two things of kind of found images that are kind of historically relevant and then what you produce?
I think there is. I mean, like it's such a good that's such a good question, because for me, like, I love portraits. I feel like that's just the kind of technical side of me. Like, I love taking pictures of people, and then I love fashion, but then I also like photographs and photo projects that particularly tell stories, and it might not be simple to kind of see them in a few pictures, but stuff that actually really breaks down, whether that's through other elements of if it's in sound or visual videography, and then it's combined with photographs. I don't find it hard to balance the two. I think that's your question, is saying like going between the two, because I just feel like there's certain projects that fit the portraits theme, or the kind of fashion, heavily fashion influence, and there's certain projects that don't need that so much necessarily.
Yeah. And so from there, what were the other kind of big things that have happened to you as you've kind of gone through? So Portrait of Britain, you did the Grain mentorship as well.
Yeah, those are the big things. I think in terms of like actually feeling like, that my story matters and I can actually do this professionally, because I don't know if you know, but even at university I felt really nervous, like showing my own self-portraits. I think we had these conversations, and I just felt like it was really awkward to even talk about this. I mean, I was the only Muslim and Asian girl in the class as well, so it was super nerve-wracking. So it just felt like, oh god, I felt quite like, I don't know, I felt at the time that people would judge me, but really that wasn't the case.
Would you say is that you personally, as in you, Maryam, or is that sort of slightly infused in the kind of structure of university and also culturally? So there's like 3 points to that I'm making, really.
Yeah.
Is your lack of confidence, do you think that's you, or at the time that perceived lack of confidence, or is that kind of slightly cultural for you, for where you've sort of?
No, I think at the time I didn't really know what it was, but when I was at college, quite similarly, where it was very diverse, the course was led by a female white tutor, and I just felt like she encouraged everything. She encouraged all kind of arts, and all the students as well. They were doing their own thing, and I don't know. I just felt like for my experience at the university, it was almost like I just didn't see that same energy and that same vibrancy, which is probably what made me just stay quiet and not really do it, and to not really explore what I wanted to actually explore in my final year, until my final year. But that's not to say that that's an excuse to discourage, or just kind of put people down around me. I just think it's something that should be spoken about openly, and that universities should introduce bringing in people from all kinds of practices, because I don't think it was just about me and my identity, but it was also about the lack of diversity within photography on the course. So it was only really taught, you only really taught how to take good fashion pictures, and we were like, people from the fashion industry would come in, but they were just like kind of BTS photographers that would come in and teach us. So it was kind of like, I think it was a combination of things. It's not just to put down that it was just that thing.
And I mean, that's an interesting thing to explore in and of itself. And I'm very conscious that I'm a kind of white male, I don't know, whatever, atheist kind of person coming at this, and then you were this kind of young female Muslim practitioner, and obviously we weren't really showing anyone weren't look like that you could identify with, and whereas I could probably identify with most of the kind of photographers that I saw as an undergraduate, and that I also kind of we now see around. So I suppose was that a kind of problem for you in some sense, that there wasn't a kind of clear figure ahead that you could kind of go, that's me, or that could be me?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I again, it's come back to the point that I don't even think that I mean, as this is like really going bad now because I'm just talking bad about the, but I feel like my experience was that I didn't really get even the foundation level of knowledge, and you know, a lot of the artists that I looked into were just independently. I searched. I had really intense mentoring sessions with like Ravi and these kind of tutors and visiting lecturers, and I would speak to people online to try and really get my foot in the door in what I was trying to do with my work. But there was, I feel now looking back, there was a huge issue because I didn't actually have any direct inspiration. It was all very indirect. Like I liked the works of different artists that weren't actually looking at identity. They were looking at, you know, the veil in a fashion way, and they were looking at different things. So yeah, I feel like that's where it really, where the problem really was.
And do you think, and this is kind of more of a speculative question, I guess, from your experience from graduating and through to sort of the future, but do you think what would be the challenges of you or other kind of, let's say, minority people working in the industry? And I think it was at the time you were there, and certainly the year after, we identified that whole issue around, we had lots of females on the course, but at most of the time we were kind of, the photographers that we were showing that were successful were all male and middle-aged and white, and it kind of did really feel like a problem, with the exception of people like Kate Peters and Claire, who kind of, we talked in detail about the fact that wasn't there. And I just wonder, for you, has your kind of identity, your cultural identity, and also your gender and etc., been, have you felt there's been an issue in terms of engaging with photography outside of university and the kind of the wider world of photography that you've now entered into?
I would say that, it has been challenging, but it's really, you know, it's the work I do now. I the way I think of it is that I work on projects that are quite complex and they're storytelling projects. So it might not be everybody's cup of tea. You know, it might just not be like, not everybody is going to be engaged with, you know, the British Asian identity. Not everyone's going to be interested in that, and that's fine by me. I'm okay with that, because I know there's many curators and individuals out there that are complete fanatics about stuff like this, and they really enjoy this kind of art. But yeah, I would say it's been challenging in terms of, one, finding that inspiration, you know, whether that's within your own circle or within that's the university environment, but then also the lack of tutors that are, you know, actually aware of work that's being created on identity, heritage, whether that's, you know, on racism or whatever it is. I think there's a huge need for more diversity in the tutors themselves. And yeah, I think education, what you did as well, you introduced a lot of theory-based lectures, and I wish that from my first year I was receiving lectures like that, you know, that were really thought-provoking, that were really, you know, that encouraged you to really read about or read around and about the subjects that really intrigue you as an image maker. And I think Andrea, she came in, and I remember she did make me read a lot about the subjects I'm interested in. Some really boring books as well, I remember, but they were really, really good because they connected exactly with what I was trying to look at with in my dissertation, in my everything, like, you know, my projects. It went hand in hand, and I think that's why academics are key, you know, but academics from all kinds of experiences and all kinds of you know, backgrounds, they need to also, there needs to be a diversity in that as well, because there's no point getting somebody who specialized in fashion photography, PhD in the image making of fashion, in the fashion industry, and not having someone who's actually, you know, into something that's a bit more different, you know, to fashion and documentary, what the typical stuff is. Basically, they should go for the oddities as well, like go into the different stuff.
So do you think, I suppose one question I would have for you is, like, do you think your identity as a Muslim, and I guess sort of fundamentally, yeah, I suppose it is a minority here. I was just thinking about the idea of You went to Pakistan, didn't you? Was it a couple of years ago? And did some work there. I'm just wondering how is it to work? Like you've worked in the UK and done your projects here, and I guess you're kind of received fairly positively because you're quite unique. As I say, I can't think of many people that work A in the way that you work, and B that kind of like have your kind of standing, as it were. How's that when you go to somewhere like Pakistan in the same way? You know, when you work there, do they kind of treat you in the same way, or is it different? Is it better? Or are you kind of like more confident because that's where your culture is kind of really the majority, has the majority standing? What?
Yeah. Well, I would say that Pakistan itself is it's a drastically different culture to British Pakistanis, like how they're used to growing up here. I went in 2019 for a research and development project for the British Council, and I would say that during that actual research trip, I even visited a few biennales, and the art scene is very hot there. Like there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of artists that are working in photography, in sculpture, in painting, and all kinds of art. When I actually worked there, though, in terms of taking pictures, that wasn't, I mean, I guess there's nothing really to comment there in terms of how people reacted, because it was all, again, family and friends. And they were actually quite encouraging back home, because they found it really intriguing that somebody living in England was really interested about their family history and their story, and they wanted to know them in Pakistan. So that was a good response. But in terms of like the actual work environment there, I mean, I guess it's very elitist, I would say, the actual the art culture there. There's not many kind of governing arts council, like there's nothing, those kind of arts councils there in Pakistan as such, as far as I'm aware anyway. So that was interesting to see, that in England we have that kind of support, and that that those kind of organizations facilitating this as artists. But then it was also interesting to see how people are actually making it work for them. So I met a lot of independent artists out there, women artists. If I could compare myself to someone, that's why I'm mentioning this. I found a lot of independent female artists, just making it work for them, and they were creating work, and they were then selling stuff, selling their prints and stuff. So that was their way of kind of really promoting them as a Asian like English, sorry, female artists, but also just making it function for them, because they're not exactly getting funded to do that work. Right. So that was interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say. Obviously, I think the challenge is right now for a lot of artists and practitioners. The difficulty is kind of getting funding and then showing work in an innovative way. I mean, goodness, kind of, so that's really difficult. You mentioned there you would, like, you went as part of a project that the Arts Council. Was that an Arts Council funded project? Was that a larger project?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was called. It is still running right now. It's called the Transforming Narratives Project, and that project is it's been funded by the Arts Council and British Council, and it is particularly a project that is working between Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Birmingham, and it's just kind of marrying all the different communities together and bringing artworks and exchanging between countries through art, basically. So it's a very interesting project, and I was in the first kind of phase of it, which was the research stage of it. And my focal point of that research was looking at the female identity in Pakistan, and that was all kind of inspired by my own like upbringing in Britain. And I hadn't been to Pakistan until 2019, so that was very different for me, because all my life, I grew up, and my mother would tell me stories about her hometown, and what she would eat and the life she would have, and then going to Pakistan for the first time and experiencing that myself, and then speaking to women and comparing them, the identities of women here and women in Pakistan. That was all part of my research, and I also created some portraits as well of the women, which can be found on my website, and it's the Women's Journey project.
Right. So from what you've said about that project, you sound like the perfect person to have kind of been engaged in that. You must have gone, wow. This is ideal.
Do you know, it was a very interesting experience because like I was interviewing the women, and obviously I was 23 years old at the time, and just listening to them about their stories, and some of them they were all women of all kinds of ages, and Pakistan's a very diverse place, so you'll get all kinds of ethnicities there. So then meeting people from all different ethnic backgrounds within Pakistan, but having the same culture as such, like traditional culture, it was very interesting to hear their stories. And I remember coming back thinking, oh my god, like I felt like I'd lived 50 years. It was a really overwhelming experience, and definitely was very humbling, because you just hear everybody's stories and you think, that could be my life, or that could have been, you just start thinking all sorts. But it's very interesting.
Now, now this is because this reminds me of the conversations we had when I was when you were a student, and we talked. I think we obviously talked a lot about photography, but we also talked quite a lot about your culture and your identity,
Yeah,
Muslim
religion. Yeah.
belief and that stuff. Um, when you went to Pakistan, and you said that was the first time you went, um, did you feel like you'd been I'm trying to think how I'm going to phrase this now, but sort of coming from Birmingham, being kind of a British um, Muslim, did you then in going to Pakistan, did you feel that you connected with how they were there? Was it kind of as you imagined, or did you feel a bit like a kind of a different person there from in the way that you might feel a minority here, if you see what I
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've never, to be honest, I've never felt like, just I want to clarify, I've never felt like a minority as such in Birmingham, because you've seen it's so diverse. There's so many British Asians, so you just can't feel that way. But and to be honest, um, I've never thought too much about being the only one that's Asian in the room. I've never thought too much about that, because I just, I look beyond that. But it's when we talk about how things work out, and the technical stuff, yeah, you does, just to break it down and summarize, I felt completely um out of place in Pakistan. It was the opposite, but I didn't have any expectations. I didn't feel like, oh my god, this is my home, this is my earth, because I'm not that kind of Asian anyway. Like for me, there's a lot of British Asians that have come before me, probably in my um 10 years, or 10 to 15 years older than me. They have felt like an identity crisis, because they've not felt here or there, and they've
mean?
kind of had this identity issue. But I've always made this very clear that I don't actually feel that way, because for me, like I'm in the generation where I embrace that I'm British, and I also embrace that I have Pakistani heritage. And I think that all comes with, because the generations have kind of moved along the way a bit. But yeah, when I went there, I just felt, oh my god, it was too much for me. In terms of um, the kind of, the place was very chaotic, and obviously I'm not used to that. I'm used to peace and quiet with my cat and my mom and dad. So it was very chaotic in Lahore, because that's where we went. I mean, you should go, John. You'd fit right in. I think I think you'd fit right in. I
I
don't know if
think
you've been to South Asia.
no, no,
Oh, you haven't? Not even India?
no, no.
Oh my god! I mean, I thought maybe in the 70s you would have taken a trip down to India or somewhere.
Yeah. No, I'd like to go, but I feel like all the time with these, yeah, and that's kind of why I was asking you a little bit, because I always feel like I'd need a chaperone. I'd need someone, I need a kind of a fixer, someone on the inside, and
Yeah, yeah,
you kind of like keep me safe and keep me kind of, just explain stuff. I'm not very good at kind of reading tourist books and stuff like that, so I just get completely lost and out of
yeah,
touch.
yeah. I
Isn't
know what you mean.
that you say how you felt there, kind of like how it is different, and I wonder, I suppose that just exposes your Britishness as well, or
Yeah.
your own, like we all have our kind of our own grown up identity. So is there any plans for you to develop that project anymore, or is that the kind of end of your contribution to that?
So my initial visit was just responding to, well, working on the Transforming Narratives project, which was, gathering research. And while I was out there, I was also creating personal work, which was really trying to just see what my life could have been like if I had been born in Pakistan. So I couldn't help but kind of see myself in like my cousins, and like, people that I'd been grown up there, I couldn't help but see what my alternate life could have looked like. So I started taking a few self-portraits of me, and those kind of, I mean, self-portraits has to come in, right? Because that's my thing now. But I started to see myself in the Pakistani woman identity. Um, and then also, because I visited with my mum had gone and met her brother after 25 years, so she'd not seen her brother in that many years. And then we also went to, like, together we was exploring a lot of the things. So together we went to see a lot of her family and a lot of friends. We visited her home that she grew up in, and that was the home that her grandfather had bought, because so initially my mum's my mum's grandparents lived in India, and now they live in Pakistan because the partition happened. So the home that they lived in was, well, the home that they've got now basically is the home that my mom grew up in, and then her grandfather also migrated in it. And yeah, so it was a very interesting home, and I visited that. And also mom had met a lot of her friends from school that had not seen her for like 35 years. So since she'd got married, my mom hadn't seen her friends. So that was a really interesting experience. So I wanted to document all that, and we did that over 2 visits in 2019. So that I developed that work, and that work's been commissioned now by the Midlands Art Centre, so MAC in Birmingham. So I'm just developing that work, and that will be exhibited next year, 2022. And then hopefully I'm going to try and tour that work elsewhere. But it's all kind of just looking at my mum and my relationship with my mum, but then also my relationship with Pakistan as a country through my mum, basically. So yeah.
That sounds great. I mean, and that does sort of sound like the kind of the, I say, the logical progression for the kinds of things that you were doing. And I know there's all of that identity with your culture, but then to actually go there and be immersed in it. I love the idea of the kind of parallel Maryam, the Maryam.
I know. It was like what I naturally did, but I mean, like, I was just gonna say as well, like earlier when you asked me, how has it been like, my progression from Portrait Britain. As soon as I did the Portrait Britain, I was mentored by Nicola Shipley at Grain, and that was fantastic because I really felt that we had conversations about how I could progress as an artist, and she really encouraged and pushed me and educated me and facilitated me in the world of photography, which was fantastic. But then also encouraged me to apply for for example, the 100 Heroines project. Like I was nominated as one of the 100 Heroines, and then I was also speaking at symposiums. Like I could never speak like that in front of lots of people, but it was through training and like through encouragement, and even things like this. Really, she really encouraged me to do that, and it's led me to achieve some really good things, and I'm grateful that I've kept that going, because it's what's really encouraged me to just keep exploring these things that I'm interested, like identity and heritage, but also it's really helped me as a person. It's, how do I say this? I would say I use photography for a more spiritual reason now. I really find the answers to things when I'm taking photographs, especially like visiting Pakistan and then taking pictures of those signs and symbols that connect with my memory. All of that stuff, it just feels so nice. It just completes me in a way. It feels like I found my purpose and belonging in life, which is quite nice, because it's the power of photography.
So to explore that a little, is that you using photography, as it were, as I guess, an expression of something, but also as a kind of, in some ways, an excuse to do something. An excuse always sounds like a really bad word, but I always found like photography was the thing that you could use to kind of go and say, have a conversation with someone. You can go and talk to them and say, oh, I'd like to take your photograph, or find out about something if there's a process or something you want to go and photograph it. And so in some ways, it's almost like the photography gets a little bit marginalized for the overall experience, the thing that you're doing. And I wonder if there's a sense of that, because you certainly, from what you said, I mean, obviously tracked your kind of progress through various things, and it does seem like your kind of, your name has popped up in various kind of contexts. And I feel like that's just really amazing, from having gone from the kind of the work that you did as an undergraduate. And I think that, as you said, maybe your first couple of years at BCU, you were kind of trying to find your way, but then it felt like you sort of came into focus, and then suddenly when you graduated, it was, you were sort of firing off in all kinds of directions. And I know that's not always easy to make that a kind of sustain a living out of that. Not every things like this don't pay your mortgage, but at the same point, you're kind of raising your profile and raising your kind of the contacts and the network that you have.
But also I'm doing something that I really enjoy as well. Like, people often say to me, oh, there's like really established photographers that are making lots of money, and they'll be like, oh, but it's so good you're doing this, like you're really you're really actually you're basically publishing your work in a way, which is something that we don't get the pleasure of doing. So I think that's actually it's a nice feeling. It's really rewarding to feel like your work, you're producing your work, but also your work matters, in the current time, and also it's like often people find it interesting. So that's very nice to see.
I mean, that's the other thing, and I haven't said it, and I feel guilty about not saying it, but you've also produced really nice work. So on top of all this, there's some really excellent work kind of happening in the background. So it's not just some jolly trips to Pakistan and some great appearances at conferences and things like that, but it's actually about producing some really quality work, which definitely sort of stands out. And I think certainly the work that you graduated with was kind of at that level, but I know the other things that I've seen you've done on your website and stuff, it feels like you're doing some really interesting, and this idea of engaging with a different form of practice. So yeah, there is the kind of standard documentary tropes and things, but there's also the self-portraiture which you've done, which I kind of feel like it works because of, as you say, you're sort of trying to work out who you are, I guess, and the images seem to contribute to that. So what's your kind of future plans, Maryam, for projects and things? So we've got this exhibition next year at the Mac. Will that be, I guess, because they've got Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, so it's like lots of really good sort of cross.
Yeah, I know, it's fantastic. So I've got the Mac show is quite big, to be honest. I've been working on that, and also the photo gallery in Wales, they'll be showing my work hopefully this year, or dependent on COVID. It's just been such an up and down, few years or couple of years. I don't even know what year we're in anymore. But it's I think it's also it's been nice because I've really taken the time to just stop and think about my practice, because prior to that, as you know, I graduated, and straight after that I was creating new work, and then straight after that I was like getting offers from like doing having exhibitions in place. So it wasn't just, I felt like it was just one thing after the other, whereas realistically as artists you need to just stop and think about stuff for a good time, a good amount of time. So yeah, I mean, that's something I'm looking forward to. So the two exhibitions, but then also I'm creating new work which I've started to do in lockdown. So again, it's all relating to home and belonging in a way. So this house that I'm in right now, it's been my family home, and I moved here when I was about 2 years old, and it was newly built. My dad kind of newly built this for his family, and so one by one everybody's been leaving, and it's just me left because living the artist life. But then for me, living in this house is just like, I almost have grown a bit of an attachment to it. So I've been watching like old VCR videos of me like goofing around as a kid in this house, but then also like the thought of actually leaving this house, or potentially leaving this house one day, it's quite emotional to even think about it. So I've been kind of holding on to all those emotions and memories of this home through photographs. So I've been capturing the house itself. I've also been capturing just all those places that I visited in Birmingham, and those things that remind me of home in a way. So it's called When I Think of Home, and that's something I'm basically producing right now and creating. So yeah, it's just kind of containing memory, I guess, this project.
Because that's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, you're in your time of life, it's that point where you do have to kind of push away from home and mum and dad or whatever, and kind of move on to start to establish your own life. And I can remember that, we all have kind of gone through that phase. And at the same time, when you start to make work about that, it can almost make it more sticky, can't it? Like you almost kind of don't want to go because it's even more poignant, and you're kind of extracting all those things and bringing them back up to the surface. Whereas really in your 20s, I think what you do is start to suppress all that so that
Yeah, it's
it
so true.
can haunt you. Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. I mean,
Yes.
like, definitely, like I know that people. I mean, I think especially like because I don't know if you're familiar, but usually in the Asian culture, the girl kind of leaves the home when not always. It's just a traditional thing. My sisters have left home before, they got married, but the girls would usually leave home when they get married, and that's it. They go live with the husband, or they go buy their own place with the husband. So for me, it's like even just the thought of that, like letting go of all that stuff, is like, no, I can't. This is my home. Like, but yeah, you have to kind of, it's almost that transition as well between like, I guess into adulthood and just being an
Yeah.
independent, like really independent person. It's that transition.
Yeah. And then, as you said, like thinking about the kind of the alternate reality of being in Pakistan, and you're kind of like facing a traumatic reality
Yeah,
of
exactly.
and then kind of, all these different things. Maybe, oh,
Probably
I
loads
don't.
of factors. You're right. Yeah.
I mean, my dad still lives in the house where I was born, and
Oh,
when I go back there, I'm exactly like you. The things you just said there made me think about that. That I can remember running around and playing games and
yeah.
having videos and a Super 8 film of myself in that house. And it still has that. When I go and see my dad, which I haven't done for a year now, it sort of resonates. So I know your kind of home can really have that draw. Um, what's I suppose, yeah, let's think a couple of other questions that I've just sort of spring to mind, Maryam. Do you are you still are you shooting digital? And this is really the boring digital film. What's your practice at the moment? Are you
I
using?
shoot between both. So I use analog and I use digital. I have a square format analog camera which I'm using, and I use my digital camera. I also use my phone. I also use another digital camera, which is a small shoot and go. I also carry a 35mm. Like I'm crazy because I'll carry all these different cameras. But for this new project, I'm currently shooting on my analog camera, so my film camera, um, and I feel like it just whatever I shoot in just depends on whatever I'm trying to achieve. I am steering more towards film because I just find that, I mean, it's just so cliche of a millennial saying this, but it just gives you that nostalgic feeling. So that's
Yeah,
why that's why I choose it. But also, I do find that um, I do find there's something about my film images when I produce them that it it literally connects exactly, like it just hits the spot. I'm able to just really stop and think about the shot. I'm really able to compose that photograph and take time when I'm composing it. With the film and with the digital cameras, I find that I'm still shooting good. I still take the pictures quite nicely, but I just feel like there's something that's too crisp about the picture that I don't. I want it to have that flaw in there, and the grain and all that stuff. I want that
and then,
in there.
and what about all the kind of found imagery? Because I know again you drew on some of your family photograph albums, but presumably you've run out of those, have you, or have you been able to
No,
find some more?
if I showed you, there's like a huge box. I mean, the thing is, I don't. It's not that I keep finding. I put all my archive images in one place now, but then there's like loads because in this house people just look at a photo and they just dash it anywhere. Whereas me, I'm really protective of the pictures. But I was gonna say, the pictures now. I think at the time when I was a student, I found that there was just so many pictures and I didn't know where to start. Whereas now, whatever I'm trying to I try and think of the story before looking at the archived images. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so I think that really helps me to really understand what is it I'm trying to tell. I mean, with this project Zeb Nissa, which is the one I'm showing in Mac, and that's the pictures I've been producing in Pakistan as well. I have tied it in with archived images, and that itself has been really interesting because I've actually realized what I've done in Pakistan is I've connected those pictures that I've seen in my album with those places that I've seen, like in reality. and that's very intriguing. And you know, it's from small stuff like, you know, my mum holding a Coke bottle, because that's usually they order like bottled Coke and 7 Up in you know, for parties, and they order them like really ice cold to enjoy. Obviously you wouldn't have that here because you just have fridges, and then you just pop out whatever drink you want. But I remember then going to Pakistan and seeing these crates of Coca-Cola bottles, and then capturing a photo of that and thinking about that moment, but then actually finding those images that connect with that. But I didn't know I was doing that when I was actually out there. So that was quite, you know, I find that that's how the archive images are connecting with my actual work, so connecting with my photographs.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. And I'm going to ask that horrible interview question, but where do you see, like, 10 years time? What, like,
That's not a horrible interview question. That's like, you've made it in an interview. That's the question that people want to hear. Where do I see myself in 10 years? I definitely want to see my photographs a lot more established, and not even just my photographs, but me as an artist. You know, I want my work to be shown in leading galleries and places, not even just in England, but around the world. I'm very intrigued in the art scene in South Asia, in the Middle East. There's a lot going on even in America. So I would want to see the work internationally, but also I would want to see the work collected, you know, because I find when I was researching at university and just generally when I was trying to search for images, that could really help me resolve, you know, my archive, but also resolve my understanding of my culture or my heritage. There was a lack of Asians in Britain in the last kind of 60 years that were from like homes, and the more intimate photographs were missing. There were studio portraits and stuff like that. But there was a real need for a more intimate spectacle of what's actually what is the community right now. I know that Anand Chabra has a great archive on called the Upna Heritage Archive, which shows Asians in Britain, well, Asians in Wolverhampton, and that's a fantastic, you know, collection. So yeah, I guess just those are my two goals, and what I want to achieve, and how I want to see myself in 10 years. Probably won't happen though. Probably will take a lot longer, because that's how life is for artists.
Okay, and so this is the alternate question. What about the alternate reality Maryam who's sitting in Pakistan? What would you have expected for her over the next 10 years, do you think?
What do you mean, like a more personal thing?
Yeah, yeah. What's like if
Yeah,
you
probably. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely. I would want to. I would want to have, you know, an actual. You know, still will want to continue my wedding business, as you know, I do wedding photography, so I'd still want to continue that, and you know, just have my own home, and probably wouldn't happen to the alternate Maryam, but it probably could. It just depends. Yeah, I think that's the way I see myself. You know,
yeah, I saw a
that I'm
fairly
more independent and that I can just basically provide for myself, because that's very hard in the artist industry. But I have a feeling when I watch this in 10 years time, I'm going to cringe a lot.
yeah, yeah, I was thinking this will come back to haunt both of us, won't it? And the horror of our digital kind of legacy that I think we're all kind of creating, and then not thinking about what it's going to be when you look back on it.
You're right,
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, there's more I could talk to you about, Mariam, but I'm conscious of time and things. So it's been really lovely to catch up with you. What I'll do is
thank
I'll
you,
say
Andrew.
bye now, but I'll just switch off the video.